The sun was beginning its slow descent behind the gentle hills that cradled the small rural town of Maplewood, casting long shadows across the cracked pavement and empty streets. On the edge of town, where the trees thinned and the land gave way to open fields, a dilapidated barn stood in stubborn defiance against the creeping wildness. Its weathered wooden planks, bleached by years of sun and rain, sagged unevenly, and the faded red paint peeled like dry bark. The rusted hinges of the great double doors groaned faintly in the breeze, as if the barn itself were whispering secrets to anyone willing to listen. Emma Carter stood at the threshold, her hands buried deep in the pockets of her worn jacket, her breath visible in the cool evening air. She was pregnant, the curve of her belly soft beneath the fabric of her sweater, a new life growing inside her that she barely dared to imagine. The barn was hers now, purchased with the last of her savings, a symbol of hope planted in soil that had seen better days. It was far from perfect, but it was hers, and it was the fresh start she desperately needed. Before we continue, make sure to like and subscribe to never miss a new video. And tell me, where are you watching this video from? I love seeing all different people come together for these stories. As she stepped inside, the scent of aged wood and earth wrapped around her like an old friend. Dust motes floated lazily in the fading sunlight that filtered through cracks in the roof, illuminating centuries of neglect. The floorboards creaked beneath her boots, and somewhere in the shadows, the faint scurry of a mouse echoed. Emma's fingers traced the grain of a splintered beam, her mind awash with both trepidation and tentative excitement. She moved slowly through the barn's cavernous interior, taking in the remnants of its former life. A rusted plow half buried in straw, a wheelbarrow overturned near the far wall, and cobwebs that draped the rafters like delicate lace. Somewhere beneath the decay, Emma sensed something more, a quiet resilience, a hidden promise waiting to be uncovered. It was as though the barn itself was inviting her to peel back its layers and breathe new life into its hollow heart. Her thoughts drifted back to the moments that had led her here. Only weeks ago, she had been sitting on the worn couch of her cramped apartment, the tiny space cluttered with unopened bills and half-packed boxes. The glow of the pregnancy test in her trembling hands had been both a shock and a revelation. The father of her child, Michael, had been quick to distance himself, his promises dissolving into silence as he packed for a new life in a city far away. The breakup had left her hollowed and raw, a fracture in her heart that mirrored the crumbling walls of the barn she now owned. Losing her job at the local diner had only compounded her fears, pushing her to the brink of despair. Eviction notices and late-night calls from collection agencies had become her unwelcome companions. Yet somewhere beneath the weight of it all, a stubborn spark of determination refused to be extinguished. Buying the barn had been an act of defiance, a stand against the tides of misfortune that threatened to sweep her away. It was a tangible piece of possibility, a blank canvas where she could sketch the outlines of a future for herself and her unborn child. Even as her hands trembled with uncertainty, she had signed the papers, feeling the weight of the keys warm in her palm like a fragile lifeline. Now, standing in the cool dusk of the barn's interior, Emma felt the first stirrings of hope. The silence around her was almost sacred, a pause between what had been and what could be. She imagined the space cleaned and restored, filled with light and laughter, a sanctuary where she and her baby could grow strong. The thought steadied her breath and lifted the heaviness from her chest. Outside, the wind whispered through the tall grass, carrying the faint sounds of the town winding down for the night. Somewhere nearby, a dog barked, and a car rumbled down a distant road. The barn seemed disconnected from the world, suspended in its own quiet moment. Emma closed her eyes and let the memories wash over her. The tear-streaked phone calls, the nights spent pacing the small apartment, and the moments of fierce resolve when she had refused to give in. She thought of the future with a mix of fear and fierce love. The baby's kicks had become stronger in recent days, a reassuring rhythm beneath her palm. She whispered a promise into the dusk, that no matter what came, she would protect this child. And together, they would build something new from the ashes of the past. As night fell, Emma lit a small lantern she had brought inside, the soft glow casting warm circles on the dusty walls. She traced her fingers over the rough wood of a support beam, feeling the texture beneath her skin. Rough, imperfect, but enduring. It was a reminder that strength often came not from perfection, but from the courage to stand firm in the face of hardship. Her mind wandered to the people she knew in Maplewood, the neighbors who had offered polite smiles but little help, the local handyman Jake who had stopped by with a cautious offer to lend a hand, and the elderly Mrs. Whitmore who ran the town's small library and had once told Emma stories of the barn's past. Each figure was a thread in the tapestry of this place, a community woven with quiet resilience and untold stories. Emma's fingers tightened around the lantern's handle. She would need help to make this barn a home, but for the first time in a long while, she felt ready to reach out. The barn was more than a structure. It was a beacon, a place where she could anchor herself and her child amidst the swirling uncertainty of their lives. The chill of the evening seeped into the barn's corners, and Emma pulled her sweater tighter around her. She took one last look around the shadowed space, the creaks and groans of the old woods settling around her like a lullaby. Then, with slow, deliberate steps, she made her way back to the door, the promise of tomorrow shimmering faintly beyond the horizon. Outside, the first stars began to twinkle in the clear sky, tiny pinpricks of light in the vast expanse. Emma paused and looked up, feeling the weight of the moment settle over her. The barn stood silent behind her, a forgotten sentinel waiting to be awakened. And as she walked toward the quiet town nestled below the hills, she carried with her the fragile hope of new beginnings, a hope as weathered and enduring as the barn itself. The morning sun filtered through the thin curtains of Emma's small apartment, casting a pale glow over the cramped space where she had spent the last few months in quiet turmoil. The air was thick with the scent of stale coffee and unfinished dreams. The cluttered room, a testament to a life unraveling one piece at a time. On the rickety kitchen table lay a faded calendar marked with overdue bills and a list of appointments, prenatal checkups, job interviews, and the looming eviction notice that had shattered whatever fragile stability she'd managed to cling to. Emma sat on the edge of the battered couch, her hands trembling as she unfolded a crumpled letter. It was a rejection from the diner where she'd worked for years, the closure of the business leaving her without income and without hope. The word, unfortunately, was etched into her mind like a scar. Her pregnancy, once a secret spark of joy, now felt like a weight pressing down on her shoulders, a constant reminder of how alone she had become. She remembered the day she found out she was pregnant, the sterile white of the clinic's walls contrasting sharply with a sudden flood of emotions. Fear, disbelief, and a fragile thread of hope all tangled inside her as she stared at the positive test. Michael's reaction had been cold, distant, his voice clipped and final as he told her he wasn't ready, that his plans didn't include her or the baby. The breakup had been swift and brutal, leaving her hollow and questioning everything she thought she knew about love and trust. The weeks that followed were a blur of sleepless nights and whispered prayers. Emma had searched for new jobs, sending out resumes and attending interviews, but each polite refusal chipped away at her resolve. The eviction notice pinned to her door was a cruel punctuation mark in a story that felt increasingly hopeless. The thought of losing the only home she had known filled her with a quiet desperation. Amidst the chaos, the barn had emerged as an unlikely beacon. It was a chance to reclaim control, to build a life on her own terms. The decision to invest in the rundown structure had been impulsive, fueled by a mixture of fear and stubborn determination. The townspeople whispered about the barn's history, a place once vibrant with life, now forgotten and left to decay. Emma saw beyond the peeling paint and broken beams. She saw a sanctuary, a future. Her first visit to the barn had been both exhilarating and terrifying. The creaking of the old wood underfoot echoed the pounding of her heart as she stepped inside. The space was vast and empty, filled with shadows and dust. But beneath the surface, Emma felt a pulse, a lingering spirit that refused to fade. She imagined the barn restored, a place where she and her child could find safety and belonging. But the reality of the project was daunting. The barn needed repairs, roof shingles replaced, floors reinforced, walls rebuilt. Emma's limited funds meant every nail and board had to be carefully counted. She spent hours poring over repair manuals and online tutorials, desperately trying to teach herself skills she had never needed before. The physical labor was exhausting, but it was a welcome distraction from the uncertainty gnawing at her mind. Jake, the local handyman, had found her one afternoon while she was struggling with a stubborn window frame. He was a tall man with weathered hands and kind eyes, his presence both a comfort and a challenge. He offered to help with the repairs, though Emma was wary of accepting assistance. Years of disappointment had made her guarded, reluctant to rely on anyone else. Yet Jake's steady patience and quiet encouragement slowly began to break down her walls. Their conversations were sparse at first, practical exchanges about tools and materials. But over time, they grew into something more. Jake shared stories about the barn's past, hinting at secrets buried beneath the dust. He spoke of a time when the barn had been a hub of activity, sheltering those in need during the town's darker days. His words ignited Emma's curiosity, stirring a desire to learn more about the place she was determined to save. Despite the small victories, loneliness was a constant companion. Emma's friends had drifted away, unable or unwilling to understand the whirlwind of changes in her life. The evenings were the hardest, the silence stretching endlessly as she curled up on the couch, her hand resting protectively on her belly. Fear whispered in the shadows, doubts gnawed at her confidence, and the future seemed like a distant, unreachable dream. Still, she refused to give in. Each morning brought a renewed determination to fight for a better life. She reminded herself that this baby was a gift, a chance to rewrite the story that had seemed so bleak. The barn was more than wood and nails. It was a symbol of resilience, a foundation upon which she could build hope. One afternoon, as she labored to clear debris from the barn's floor, Jake arrived with a toolbox in hand. He moved with practiced efficiency, repairing a broken door latch and reinforcing a wobbly beam. Emma watched him work, feeling a mixture of gratitude and something softer, a tentative warmth that surprised her. She realized that accepting help didn't diminish her strength. It reshaped it. Their partnership grew, a quiet alliance forged in shared purpose. Jake's knowledge complemented Emma's determination, and together they began to breathe life back into the barn's tired frame. With each repaired board and cleared corner, Emma felt the weight of her burdens lighten, replaced by a burgeoning sense of possibility. Yet, beneath the progress, the challenges loomed large. Financial strain tightened its grip, and the threat of losing the barn to developers cast a shadow over their efforts. Emma wrestled with the harsh realities of motherhood and survival, the delicate balance between hope and hardship. The baby's kicks became a steady reminder of what was at stake, a heartbeat echoing her own fierce resolve. In quiet moments, Emma allowed herself to dream. She envisioned the barn not just as a home, but as a refuge for others like her. Expectant mothers facing uncertainty, women seeking strength in community. The idea took root, growing alongside her unborn child, a vision of healing and connection that filled the empty spaces in her heart. As twilight settled over Maplewood, Emma wrapped her arms around her belly and stepped outside. The sky blazed with streaks of pink and gold, the promise of a new day unfolding in the horizon. The barn stood silhouetted against the fading light, no longer just a forgotten relic, but a beacon of hope. She breathed in the cool evening air, the scent of earth and grass grounding her. She was alone, but not lonely. She was scared, but not defeated. And as the first stars began to twinkle overhead, Emma made a silent vow to herself and to the life growing within her. She would endure, she would rebuild, and she would find her way forward, no matter the cost. The morning sun spilled golden light across the broken timbers of the barn as Emma arrived once again, her steps purposeful despite the weariness that clung to her bones. The cool air carried the faint scent of damp earth and wildflowers, a reminder that beneath the neglect, life still pulsed in this forgotten corner of Maplewood. Today, she was no longer a visitor, but an owner, standing on the threshold of a new chapter with the keys to the barn clutched tightly in her hand. Inside, the space seemed larger than before, a cavernous void waiting to be tamed. Sunbeams filtered through gaps in the roof, casting flickering patterns on the dusty floor where broken tools and forgotten fragments lay scattered. Emma's fingers traced the contours of a splintered beam as she imagined the work ahead. Walls to be repaired, floors to be leveled, windows to be replaced. The task was daunting, but beneath the surface of decay, she sensed a hidden potential, a promise buried in the weathered wood. She knelt to examine a faded newspaper clipping she had found tucked beneath a loose floorboard days earlier. The yellowed paper told stories of a bustling farmstead, of harvest festivals and barn dances, of a time when this place had been the heart of the community. The barn had once been alive with laughter and purpose, a sanctuary for neighbors and families alike. Emma felt a pang of longing for that lost vitality, a yearning to breathe life back into these walls. The townspeople had their own stories and rumors about the barn's past. Whispers exchanged over cups of coffee at the diner or in hushed tones at the general store. Some spoke of secret meetings held under the cover of night, others of shelter offered to those in need during hard times. Emma listened carefully, gathering fragments of history that deepened her connection to the place. It was more than just a structure. It was a vessel of memory and resilience. Jake stopped by mid-morning, his weathered truck rumbling down the gravel driveway. He carried a toolbox and a stack of old wooden planks, his face creased with focus, but softened by the faintest hint of a smile when he saw Emma. Without waiting for an invitation, he began to assess the damage, pointing out areas where the roof needed urgent attention and where the foundation showed signs of shifting. Their conversations had grown from cautious exchanges to comfortable collaboration. Jake, with his easy confidence and practical knowledge, became both a partner and a guide through the labyrinth of repairs. Yet beneath his straightforward manner, Emma sensed he harbored his own stories, a quiet history that mirrored her own struggles in some unspoken way. Together, They cleared debris and stacked firewood, their movements synchronizing as they worked side by side. Emma found herself opening up in moments between hammer strikes and sweeping dust, sharing fragments of her story, the broken relationships, the pregnancy that had upended her life, the gamble she had taken in buying the barn. Jake listened without judgment, his steady presence a balm to her frayed nerves. As the day wore on, Emma's connection to the barn deepened. She began to see beyond the peeling paint and splintered boards to the bones of the structure, strong and enduring beneath the surface. The sun warmed her back as she climbed a rickety ladder to peer through a broken window, imagining sunlight flooding the space, children's laughter echoing against the walls. Her mind wandered to the future she hoped to build here, a sanctuary not just for herself and her child, but for others who carried burdens like hers. The barn could be transformed into a place of refuge, a community center where single mothers and expectant women found support and strength. The vision was fragile, but growing, like the tiny life stirring within her. In the quiet moments, Emma allowed herself to dream. She pictured rooms filled with warmth and color, shelves lined with books and toys, the hum of conversation and the comfort of belonging. She thought of the women who might come here, carrying their own stories of loss and hope, and felt a fierce determination to make that dream real. Jake shared stories that hinted at hidden depths in the barn's history. Tales of a woman named Margaret, who had led efforts to aid the vulnerable during a difficult era, using the barn as a secret meeting place. Emma was captivated by the idea that the barn had once been a refuge, its walls holding the echoes of courage and compassion. It was as if the past whispered encouragement, urging her to carry on the legacy. Despite the growing hope, the reality of the work remained overwhelming. Emma's body ached from the physical labor, and the financial strain pressed heavily on her. Each nail and board came with a cost, and the threat of local developers eyeing the land loomed like a dark cloud. Yet, with Jake's practical help and her own stubborn resolve, progress was slow but steady. As dusk approached, Emma stood outside the barn, watching the sky shift from pink to deep indigo. The silhouette of the barn against the fading light was both fragile and defiant. She placed a hand on her belly, feeling the gentle movements inside, a steady reminder of why she endured. The barn was no longer just a building. It was a testament to survival, a symbol of hope carved from hardship. The community around her was beginning to stir, subtle but significant. Neighbors offered smiles and occasional words of encouragement, their curiosity piqued by her determination. Emma sensed the first threads of connection weaving between her and the town, a fragile tapestry of support that might one day grow strong enough to sustain them all. As night settled in, Emma lit a small lantern and carried it inside the barn, the soft glow illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. She ran her fingers along the rough wooden beams, feeling the texture beneath her skin, a reminder that even in imperfection, there was strength. This barn, like her, bore the marks of struggle, but also the promise of renewal. She breathed deeply, the scent of earth and old wood grounding her amidst the uncertainty. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new repairs, and new decisions. But for now, in this quiet moment, Emma allowed herself to feel the faint stirrings of hope, fragile but undeniable. With a final glance around the shadowed space, she stepped outside, the cool night air brushing against her face. Above, the stars blinked into existence one by one, silent witnesses to her journey. Emma wrapped her coat tighter around her and looked toward the horizon, where the first light of possibility awaited. The barn stood behind her, a broken shell, yes, but also a beacon waiting to be reborn. The morning light streamed unevenly through the gaps in the barn's weathered roof, casting long, fragmented shadows across the dust-laden floor. Emma's breath caught as she knelt beside a loose floorboard near the corner, her fingers tracing the edges of the worn wood. The house was still quiet, save for the faint chirping of birds outside and the occasional creak of the old beams settling. She hesitated for a moment, the weight of uncertainty pressing down on her chest, before carefully prying the board upward. Beneath it, concealed by decades of dirt and neglect, lay a narrow trapdoor hinged with rusted iron. The edges were warped, but the wood beneath looked remarkably intact. Emma's pulse quickened. This was something unexpected, a hidden fragment of the barn waiting patiently to be discovered. She brushed away the dust and debris, revealing a latch that groaned softly as she lifted it open, the sound echoing in the cavernous space. A faint, musty smell rose from the opening, mingling with the earthy scent of the barn. Descending the narrow wooden steps, Emma's eyes adjusted to the dimness, revealing a small cellar tucked beneath the barn's foundation. The air was cool and damp, and the floor was strewn with old crates, boxes, and bundles wrapped in faded cloth. Her heart pounded with a mix of trepidation and curiosity as she reached out to touch the weathered surfaces. Among the crates, Emma found a collection of journals bound in cracked leather, their pages yellowed and brittle. She lifted one carefully, the spine creaking softly as she opened it to reveal elegant, looping handwriting. The entries told stories of days long past, of hardship and hope, of quiet acts of courage and resilience. Emma's fingers trembled as she read passages describing the barn's secret past. A refuge for women during difficult times, a place where they could find safety and solace, away from judgment and fear. The journals spoke of a woman named Margaret, a strong and compassionate leader who had rallied the community to protect those in need. Margaret's words painted vivid pictures of late-night gatherings, whispered plans, and acts of defiance against the challenges that threatened their small town. Emma felt a profound connection to this woman, sensing that their stories, though separated by generations, were intertwined by shared struggles and unyielding determination. In another crate, Emma discovered personal letters tied with faded ribbons. The handwriting was familiar, delicate yet resolute, and as she read, a shiver ran down her spine. The letters hinted at a hidden connection between Margaret and Emma's own ancestors, a lineage of women bound by strength and sacrifice. The realization settled like a warm ember in her chest, anchoring her to this place more deeply than she had ever imagined. Jake arrived just as Emma was carefully placing the journals back into their crate. His presence was steady and reassuring, a grounding force in the swirling mix of emotions. Seeing the open trap door, he stepped down beside her, curiosity evident in his eyes. Emma shared her discoveries, the stories of Margaret and the barn's role as a sanctuary. Jake listened intently, nodding thoughtfully as the pieces of the past began to fall into place. Together, they began to sort through the artifacts, piecing together the hidden history that had lain dormant beneath the barn's surface. Each journal entry, each letter, was a thread weaving a tapestry of resilience and hope. A testament to the women who had come before, whose courage had shaped the very foundation on which Emma now stood. The cellar itself seemed to breathe with memories, the silence filled with the echoes of whispered conversations and quiet determination. Emma imagined the women who had gathered here, their faces flickering in the dim light of lanterns, their voices hushed but resolute, as they planned for a future fraught with uncertainty. The barn was more than wood and nails. It was a living archive of strength. As the afternoon sun dipped lower, casting golden hues through the cracks above, Emma and Jake carefully carried the crates back up the stairs. The barn's empty space suddenly felt alive, filled with the weight of stories waiting to be told. Emma's resolve hardened. This place was not just a project or a refuge for her unborn child. It was a legacy she was determined to honor. That evening, Emma sat alone in the barn, a single lantern casting a warm glow over the journals spread before her. Her hands rested protectively on her belly as she read the words of Margaret, feeling the steady rhythm of new life within her. The past and present intertwined in that quiet moment, a bridge spanning generations of women bound by courage and hope. Outside, the wind whispered through the tall grass, carrying the secrets of the barn into the night. Emma closed the journal gently, a sense of peace settling over her. The path ahead was still uncertain, fraught with challenges she could not yet foresee. But she was no longer alone. The stories beneath the floorboards had become a source of strength, a reminder that even in the darkest times, sanctuary could be found, and that she, too, could be a beacon for others. As she rose and extinguished the lantern, the barn stood silent around her, its bones creaking softly in the cool night air. Emma stepped outside, the stars glittering overhead like scattered promises. The hidden cellar beneath the barn had revealed more than history. It had unveiled a purpose. And with that knowledge, Emma felt the fragile stirrings of hope grow stronger, weaving into the fabric of her own story, ready to be carried forward. The dawn light filtered softly through the barn's cracked windows, casting a gentle glow on the scattered journals and yellowed letters that Emma had carefully spread across the workbench. The air inside was still and heavy with the scent of aged paper and wood, a quiet sanctuary where the past whispered its secrets. Emma's fingers traced the faded ink on a letter, her mind weaving the threads of history into a tapestry that began to reveal the barn's true soul. Through the pages of the journals, she learned of a time when the town had been gripped by hardship, a harsh winter that left families struggling, and a community fractured by fear and suspicion. In those dark days, the barn had transformed from a mere shelter for livestock into a refuge for women and children cast aside by circumstance. It was a place where Margaret, a woman of fierce compassion and quiet strength, had rallied others to provide food, warmth, and protection. Margaret's voice echoed from the pages, her words both a call to action and a balm for weary hearts. She chronicled the challenges they faced, shortages of supplies, the constant threat of discovery by those who opposed their efforts, and the unyielding determination to create a safe haven. Emma felt the weight of those struggles, the sacrifices made in silence and shadow, and found herself drawn deeper into the legacy left behind. Among the letters, Emma discovered personal correspondence between Margaret and a woman whose handwriting bore a striking resemblance to her own. Delicate yet purposeful, carrying the same undercurrent of resilience. The letters spoke of kinship, shared burdens, and a promise to protect one another against the tides of adversity. The realization settled over Emma like a gentle tide. Her ancestors had been part of this hidden history, their lives intertwined with the barn's story in ways she had never imagined. As she read, Emma's heart swelled with a newfound sense of belonging. The barn was no longer just a building to restore. It was a living testament to the strength that had been passed down through generations. The women who had come before had faced their own battles, carving out spaces of hope and sanctuary amid uncertainty. Now, Emma was called to carry that torch forward. Jake arrived mid-morning, the familiar rumble of his truck breaking the quiet. He approached with a cautious smile, setting down a bundle of tools and wood. Emma shared her discoveries, reading aloud passages that spoke of courage, community, and unwavering resolve. Jake listened attentively, his eyes reflecting a respect that deepened their growing bond. Together, they began to map out plans not only for the barn's physical restoration, but for its rebirth as a place of refuge. Emma's vision expanded beyond her own needs. She imagined the barn serving as a sanctuary for other women like her, those navigating the uncertainties of pregnancy, single motherhood, and the search for belonging. The barn would be a living legacy, honoring the past while forging a new path forward. The weight of responsibility settled on Emma's shoulders, but it was tempered by a fierce determination. She was not simply rebuilding wood and stone, but rekindling a spirit that had endured through time. Each nail hammered, each beam reinforced, was an act of homage to Margaret and the many unnamed women who had shaped this place with quiet courage. In the evenings, Emma found herself returning to the journals, seeking guidance and comfort in Margaret's words. The entries were filled with practical wisdom, recipes for herbal remedies, advice on organizing community aid, and reflections on the power of solidarity. The past became a wellspring of strength, a reminder that even the smallest acts of kindness could ripple outward and transform lives. One afternoon, as Emma and Jake cleared debris from a corner of the barn, she paused to look up at the slanted beams above. Sunlight streamed through the gaps, illuminating motes of dust that danced like tiny stars. She imagined the barn filled with light and laughter, a place where stories would be shared, wounds healed, and new beginnings embraced. The townspeople's curiosity was growing. Whispers of Emma's project stirred in the local cafe and at the market. Some offered cautious encouragement, others skepticism, but a few brave souls stepped forward with offers of help, old tools, spare lumber, and words of encouragement. Emma welcomed each gesture, sensing the fragile beginnings of a community rallying around a shared cause. Yet, beneath the promise, challenges loomed. Financial strain tightened its grip, and the threat of developers eyeing the property cast long shadows. Emma grappled with the tension between hope and hardship, the delicate balance of nurturing a dream while confronting harsh realities. The steady kicks of her unborn child were a constant reminder of what was at stake. In quiet moments, she confided in Jake, sharing fears and uncertainties that she rarely voiced aloud. His steady presence was a balm, his practical support matched by an unspoken understanding. Together, they navigated the complexities of restoration and renewal, their partnership deepening as they worked toward a common goal. As the season shifted toward autumn, the barn began to shed its neglect, revealing glimpses of the sanctuary it could become. Walls were patched, floors cleared, and the air grew lighter with each repaired window. The transformation was slow, marked by both setbacks and small triumphs. But with every step, Emma felt the legacy of Margaret and her ancestors guiding her forward. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Emma sat on the worn steps of the barn, her hands resting gently on her belly. The journals lay beside her, open to a passage filled with hope and resolve. She breathed in the crisp air, a quiet determination settling within her. The barn was no longer just a structure of wood and nails. It was a beacon of resilience, a testament to the enduring power of courage and community. Emma knew the road ahead would be fraught with challenges, but she was ready to face them, carrying the strength of the women who had come before her and forging a new legacy for those yet to come. The first chill of autumn settled over Maplewood as Emma stood in the barn's doorway, surveying the progress made so far. The once crumbling structure was beginning to take shape, a patchwork of new wood and weathered beams, windows patched and floors cleared. The air was crisp carrying the scent of fallen leaves and distant smoke from chimneys, waking to colder nights. For a moment, she allowed herself to feel a spark of pride, but it was quickly tempered by the shadow looming over her. The looming threat of developers eager to claim the land beneath the barn for a sprawling commercial project. The news had come suddenly, whispered at the town's general store and confirmed by a terse letter slipped under her apartment door. A corporation with deep pockets and grand ambitions had set their sights on the property, eager to erase the barn's history and replace it with gleaming storefronts. The realization hit Emma like a cold wave. The barn she'd fought so hard to reclaim was now a prize in a battle far beyond her means. Jake met her outside the barn that afternoon, his face grim as he unfolded the letter. "They're serious about this," he said, voice low but steady. "They've already started buying up neighboring lots. If they get this one, it's over." Emma's heart tightened. The thought of losing the barn, the sanctuary she was slowly building, was unbearable. Yet the practical realities pressed in. The cost of repairs, the limited funds, and now the looming threat of losing everything. She clenched her fists, a storm of frustration and fear swirling inside her. But surrender was not an option. Drawing strength from the stories she'd uncovered about Margaret and the women who had faced their own battles, Emma resolved to fight. The barn was more than wood and nails. It was a legacy of resilience and hope, a beacon for those who needed refuge. She refused to let it be swallowed by greed and indifference. Jake's support was unwavering. Together, they began drafting plans to rally the community, to raise awareness and gather allies. Emma reached out to neighbors and local historians, sharing the barn's hidden past and her vision for its future. Some were skeptical, worn down by years of broken promises and lost causes. But others responded with quiet determination. Late into the evenings, Emma pored over permits and legal documents, learning the intricacies of property rights and zoning laws. The language was dense and daunting, but her resolve hardened with each page. Every setback was met with renewed determination, every roadblock a challenge to overcome. Financial strain tightened its grip. The costs of renovation mounted, and the demands of preparing for motherhood weighed heavily. Emma's body ached more with each passing day, the baby's movements a constant reminder of the life she was fighting to protect. Nights were restless, filled with worries about the barn, the future, and the uncertain path ahead. Despite the exhaustion, moments of unexpected kindness bolstered her spirit. Mrs. Whitmore from the library brought a box of old town records and photographs, offering insights into the barn's role in Maplewood's history. Neighbors stopped by with tools, wood, scraps, and warm meals, small acts of solidarity that fanned the flames of hope. One afternoon, a tense meeting was held at the town hall. Developers presented slick presentations and promises of economic growth, their voices smooth but cold. Emma listened as they dismissed the barn's significance, painting it as an obstacle to progress. When it was her turn to speak, her voice trembled but carried the weight of conviction. She spoke of the barn's history as a sanctuary, the lives it had sheltered, and the future it could offer to women like herself. She shared her own story, the struggles of single motherhood, the fight to create a safe space. Her words hung in the room, a fragile but powerful plea that stirred some hearts and hardened others. The meeting ended without resolution, but the encounter crystallized the stakes. The battle for the barn was no longer just about restoration. It was a fight for identity, memory, and the right to hope. Back at the barn, Emma and Jake worked side by side, repairing a sagging wall battered by wind and rain. The physical labor was grueling, but each nail driven was a declaration of defiance. The barn was alive with purpose once more, its walls echoing with the determination of those who refused to let it fall. In quieter moments, Emma wrestled with doubt and fear. The future was uncertain, and the sacrifices demanded felt immense. Yet the steady rhythm of the baby's kicks was a balm, a reminder that life persisted in the face of adversity. She found solace in the journals, revisiting Margaret's words of courage and community. The past and present intertwined, a continuum of strength that flowed through generations. Emma was not alone. She carried the legacy of countless women who had faced darkness and chosen to build light. One evening, as autumn leaves swirled in the cooling breeze, Emma stood outside the barn and looked up at the sky, stars beginning to pierce the twilight. The barn stood silhouetted against the fading light, weathered but unbroken. It was a symbol of resilience, a testament to what could be saved when hearts and hands came together. She wrapped a hand around her growing belly and whispered a vow: to protect this place, to fight for its future, and to nurture the life within her with the same fierce love that had sustained those who came before. The road ahead was uncertain and steep, but Emma's resolve was unshaken. With Jake by her side and the strength of generations behind her, she was ready to face whatever challenges awaited. The barn was more than a building. It was a promise, a sanctuary born of struggle and hope, destined to rise again. The crisp morning air was punctuated by the soft rustling of fallen leaves as Emma stepped outside the barn, the sun casting a warm glow over the patchwork of repaired walls and newly cleared windows. The barn, once a silent relic, now hummed with a quiet energy, its transformation a testament to months of relentless effort and unwavering hope. Today, Emma felt a new sense of purpose settle over her, one that stretched beyond the confines of her personal struggle and reached toward the heart of the community around her. Determined to weave the barn back into the fabric of Maplewood, Emma began reaching out to her neighbors, local historians, and anyone who might share her vision. Her first stop was the town's small library, where Mrs. Whitmore greeted her with a gentle smile and a stack of old photographs and newspaper clippings. Together, they pored over images of past harvest festivals, barn dances, and community gatherings that had once filled the space with life. Each photograph was a thread connecting the present to a rich tapestry of shared history. Word of Emma's project spread slowly but steadily. At the local cafe, conversations shifted from polite curiosity to genuine interest. A few familiar faces offered hesitant smiles and tentative offers of help, while others shared stories of their own connections to the barn or the women who had found refuge there decades ago. It was as if the barn's dormant spirit was awakening, stirring memories and rekindling a collective sense of belonging. One afternoon, Emma hosted a small gathering at the barn, inviting neighbors and friends to see the progress and hear her vision. The space was still rough around the edges, with tools and lumber scattered about. But the warmth of the lanterns and the promise in Emma's voice filled the room. She spoke candidly about the challenges she faced, the financial strain, the looming threat of developers, and the personal trials of pregnancy and single motherhood. Her vulnerability resonated deeply, breaking down barriers and forging new bonds. Among those who came was Mrs. Jensen, an elderly woman with a weathered face and eyes that held a lifetime of stories. She shared tales of the barn's role during hard times, of women banding together to support one another, and of Margaret's legacy that had inspired generations. Her words breathed life into the old journals Emma had found, turning history into a living, breathing force. Encouraged by the growing support, Emma began organizing volunteer days, where the townspeople gathered to help with repairs, cleanup, and painting. The barn became a hub of activity and connection, a place where hands worked in harmony and stories were shared over cups of coffee and homemade pies. Emma watched as friendships blossomed and isolation gave way to community. Jake's presence remained a steady anchor throughout. His practical skills and quiet encouragement complemented Emma's passion and vision. Together, they coordinated efforts, managed resources, and celebrated small victories with grateful smiles. Their partnership, forged in sweat and shared purpose, deepened with each passing day. Yet, beneath the blossoming hope, challenges persisted. Financial hurdles loomed large, and the threat of losing the barn to development remained a constant shadow. Emma juggled appointments with contractors, meetings with local officials, and the physical demands of pregnancy. Exhaustion was a frequent companion, but so was determination. In moments of quiet reflection, Emma found solace in the growing network of support. Letters of encouragement arrived from distant relatives who had learned of her efforts, and donations trickled in from unexpected sources. The barn was no longer a solitary endeavor, but a shared dream, nurtured by the collective will of a community rediscovering its roots. One evening, as twilight painted the sky in shades of purple and gold, Emma stood on the barn's porch, watching neighbors gather around a fire pit. Laughter and conversation floated on the cool air, weaving a tapestry of connection that stretched beyond the walls. She felt a profound sense of belonging, a healing that went beyond bricks and mortar. Her hand rested gently on her belly, the steady movements within a reminder of the life she was nurturing amidst the chaos. The barn's transformation mirrored her own, a journey from uncertainty to empowerment, from isolation to connection. Together, they embodied resilience. As stars began to twinkle overhead, Emma whispered a silent thank you to the women who had come before, to those standing beside her now, and to the future yet unwritten. The barn was no longer just a building, it was a beacon of hope, a sanctuary reborn through the strength of community and the courage of one woman determined to make a difference. The night settled softly around Maplewood, wrapping the barn in quiet promise. Emma knew the road ahead would still hold challenges, but she faced them fortified by the bonds she had forged and the legacy she carried. In the company of friends and the embrace of a town awakened, she found the strength to continue, to build not just a shelter, but a home for those seeking refuge and renewal. A storm had been brewing all afternoon, thick gray clouds rolling over the hills surrounding Maplewood, muting the landscape beneath a heavy, somber sky. Inside the barn, Emma moved slowly, her hands trembling slightly as she secured the last of the loose boards on a window. The wind rattled the old wooden frame, a low moan that echoed through the rafters, and the first fat drops of rain began to tap against the roof. The storm was coming, fierce and unrelenting. But Emma felt a strange sense of calm beneath the brewing turmoil. Her body was changing, growing heavier with each passing week. The baby inside her stirred gently as she paused to press a hand against her belly, feeling the steady rhythm of life pulsing beneath the thin fabric of her sweater. The barn, once cold and abandoned, had become a sanctuary, not just for the structure itself, but for the fragile hope that grew within her. As the rain intensified, Emma heard the distant rumble of thunder and knew the storm would not wait. She gathered a few essentials, a blanket, some water, and a small bag of supplies, and prepared to settle in for the night. The barn was not yet fully restored, but it was the safest place she had, a shelter from the storm both outside and within. Suddenly, A sharp pain shot through her abdomen, catching her breath and sending a wave of panic through her. Her hands trembled as she realized what was happening. Labor was beginning. The storm's fury outside seemed to mirror the sudden upheaval in her body, fierce and unpredictable. Jake, who had been helping with repairs earlier that day, arrived just as Emma was struggling to steady herself. His eyes widened with concern as she grasped his arm, voice barely a whisper. Without hesitation, he moved to support her, guiding her gently toward a makeshift corner of the barn they had cleared and lined with blankets. The rain hammered against the roof, and the wind howled through the cracks. But inside the barn, a small circle of warmth and care began to form. Jake's steady presence was a balm to Emma's rising fear. He fetched water, adjusted the blankets, and offered quiet words of encouragement, his hands steady despite the tension in the air. Neighbors, alerted by the storm and word of Emma's situation, began to arrive one by one, braving the elements to offer help. Mrs. Whitmore brought herbal teas and soothing tinctures, her calm demeanor a comforting presence. Others arrived with pillows, clean towels, and blankets, forming a circle of support around Emma as the labor intensified. The barn, once a silent witness to neglect and decay, now echoed with the sounds of life. Breathless gasps, whispered prayers, and the steady rhythm of encouragement. Emma focused on the movements within her, the strength of the child she was bringing into the world, and the community rallying around her. Hours passed in a blur of pain and perseverance. The storm outside raged on, but inside the barn, a fragile cocoon of hope held firm. Finally, as the first light of dawn seeped through the cracks, Emma gave a final, shuddering breath, and the cries of a newborn pierced the stillness. Tears streamed down Emma's face as Jake carefully wrapped the baby in a soft blanket, handing the fragile life into her arms. The weight of exhaustion and relief mingled in her chest as she gazed down at the tiny face, the beginning of a new chapter woven into the fabric of the barn's history. The storm had left its mark. Broken branches littered the yard, and a section of the roof had given way under the relentless rain. But the community's response was immediate. Neighbors arrived with ladders, tarps, and tools, working together to repair the damage. The barn, like Emma, was resilient, rising again from the tempest's assault. In the days that followed, Emma embraced her new role as a mother, the quiet moments with her daughter filled with awe and tenderness. The barn transformed from a place of work into a home, its walls now witness to lullabies and the soft coos of new life. Jake remained a constant presence, helping with repairs and offering support as Emma navigated the challenges of motherhood. The community's bond deepened, their shared efforts turning the barn into a sanctuary, not just for Emma and her child, but for all who sought refuge. As autumn deepened, the barn stood stronger, a symbol of endurance and renewal. Emma's journey, marked by hardship and hope, mirrored the barn's own transformation. Together, they embodied the promise of new beginnings, the intertwining of past and present, and the enduring power of community and resilience. The crisp morning air carried the faint scent of wood smoke and fresh earth as Emma stood on the threshold of the barn, cradling her daughter close against the soft folds of her sweater. Outside, the world was awakening, dew glistening on the grass and birdsong threading through the cool air. The barn, once a crumbling relic, now stood proudly restored, its sturdy beams and freshly painted walls a testament to months of tireless effort, community support, and unwavering hope. Inside, the space had been transformed from a site of labor into a sanctuary of warmth and welcome. Sunlight poured through the repaired windows, illuminating cozy corners where soft cushions and blankets awaited visitors. Shelves lined with books, toys, and handmade crafts spoke of a place designed not just for shelter, but for nurturing and growth. The scent of lavender and vanilla lingered gently, mingling with the earthiness of the wood and the quiet hum of life. Emma's gaze swept over the room, a swell of emotion tightening her throat. The barn was no longer just her refuge. It was a beacon for others navigating the uncertainties of pregnancy and single motherhood. It was a place where stories could be shared without judgment, where strength was drawn from community, and where new beginnings were embraced with open arms. Her thoughts drifted back to the early days, when the barn had been little more than a dilapidated shell, and hope had felt fragile and distant. The journey had been arduous, marked by financial strain, moments of doubt, and the ever-present threat of losing the barn to development. Yet, through perseverance and the steadfast support of neighbors, friends, and the legacy of the women who had come before, that fragile hope had blossomed into something tangible and enduring. Jake entered quietly, his hands dusted with sawdust and a gentle smile playing on his lips. He knelt beside Emma, his eyes softening as he looked at the sleeping child nestled in her arms. "She's beautiful," he said, voice low, filled with a quiet pride. Emma smiled, the weight of exhaustion and joy mingling within her. "She is," she whispered. "And this place, it's everything I hoped it could be." Together, they moved through the barn, discussing plans to expand its reach. A community center offering support groups, childcare, educational workshops, and resources for expectant and single mothers. Emma envisioned a space alive with laughter, learning, and healing, where women could find strength in each other's stories and build futures unbound by fear. The community's investment in the barn's new purpose was palpable. Volunteers continued to contribute time and resources, local businesses donated supplies, and the town's leaders began to recognize the barn as a vital part of Maplewood's social fabric. The barn was no longer just a building, it was a symbol of resilience and renewal, a living legacy forged by collective will and compassionate hearts. As afternoon light filtered through the windows, Emma sat with a group of women gathered for a support circle. Stories flowed freely, of struggles faced, victories won, and dreams yet to be realized. The barn's walls seemed to absorb the warmth and courage, becoming a sanctuary where vulnerability was met with understanding and strength was nurtured in community. Outside, children played in the yard, their laughter ringing clear and bright against the backdrop of rolling hills and open sky. Emma watched them from the porch, a sense of peace settling over her. The barn had become a place of belonging, a refuge where the past and future intertwined in a tapestry of hope. Her daughter stirred in her arms, tiny fingers curling around hers, a living reminder of the journey that had brought them here. Emma's heart swelled with gratitude for the women who had paved the way, for the community that had embraced her vision, and for the fragile, fierce hope that had carried her through. The barn's transformation mirrored her own, a journey from uncertainty to empowerment, from isolation to connection. Together, they embodied the enduring power of resilience, love, and the unbreakable bonds forged in shared struggle. As the sun dipped low, casting golden hues across the landscape, Emma stood once more at the barn's entrance, the quiet hum of life surrounding her. She whispered a vow to honor the legacy of those who came before, to nurture the sanctuary she had built, and to continue forging a future where strength and hope flourished. The barn, once a forgotten relic, had become a beacon, a place where new stories would be written, where mothers and children would find refuge, and where the promise of tomorrow shone brightly against the twilight. And as Emma held her daughter close, she knew that this was only the beginning. Sunlight spilled gently through the barn's wide-open doors, casting long, warm beams that danced across the polished wooden floor. The soft patter of tiny footsteps echoed lightly through the space, a delicate rhythm that wove itself into the fabric of the room. Emma knelt near the center, arms outstretched, a smile lighting her face as her daughter, wrapped in a hand-knit sweater, took tentative first steps toward her. The child's laughter, pure and unguarded, filled the barn with a joy that seemed to lift the very air. The barn had come a long way from its days of neglect and dust. Now it was alive with purpose and promise. A sanctuary where stories of struggle had transformed into ones of resilience and hope. Emma's vision, once fragile and uncertain, had blossomed into a vibrant reality, embraced by a community that had grown alongside her. The walls, once silent witnesses to decay, now bore the marks of laughter, learning, and new beginnings. As her daughter toddled closer, Emma's heart swelled with a profound sense of peace. She reached out, steadying the small hands as the child wobbled, then took a confident step forward. The moment felt timeless, a bridge between the past and the future, woven together by the strength that had carried them both here. Emma's thoughts drifted to the journey that had brought her to this place. The hardships faced, the nights spent questioning and fighting, the moments when hope seemed just beyond reach. The barn had been more than a refuge. It had been a crucible where pain and courage melded into something enduring. It had become a haven not only for her and her daughter, but for countless women seeking shelter from storms, both literal and metaphorical. The community center within the barn flourished, offering support, education, and sanctuary to those who walked through its doors. Emma had dedicated herself to preserving the legacy of the women who had come before, honoring their strength by creating a space where others could find belonging and empowerment. The barn's history, once hidden beneath layers of dust and silence, now shone as a beacon of resilience. In the quiet moments, Emma would often find herself standing outside the barn at dusk, watching the last light fade behind the hills. The stars emerged one by one, silent witnesses to the lives unfolding below. She felt the weight of generations resting on her shoulders. A lineage of women who had faced darkness and chosen to build light. Their courage was woven into the very timbers of the barn, a tapestry of strength and connection. The first steps of her daughter were more than a milestone. They were a symbol of continuity and hope. Emma knew that the journey ahead would hold challenges, but she faced them fortified by the love that surrounded her and the community that had lifted her up. The barn was no longer just a building. It was a living testament to the power of resilience, motherhood, and shared history. As the child took another step, reaching up to grasp Emma's hands, a gentle breeze stirred the curtains, carrying with it the scent of earth and wildflowers. Emma smiled, feeling the pulse of life and legacy entwined in that moment. The barn stood as a guardian of stories, past, present, and those yet to be written. Holding her daughter close once more, Emma whispered a promise: to nurture this sanctuary, to honor the women who had paved the way, and to ensure that the barn would remain a place where hope and strength flourished. The future stretched out before them, vast and uncertain, yet filled with the light of possibility. Together, mother and child stepped forward into the day, the barn's doors wide open, welcoming all who sought refuge and renewal. The echoes of the past mingled with the laughter of the present, a harmonious chorus that would carry them into whatever lay ahead. And as the sun climbed higher, bathing the barn in golden light, Emma felt the quiet certainty that here, at last, they were home.